Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. On behalf of the Organization for Social Science Research in Eastern and Southern Africa, OSRIA, I would like to warmly welcome you to today's webinar. And the webinar is on South-South Knowledge Exchange. It's a comparative study of climate finance and carbon credit pathways in the coffee sector. The comparison is between Ethiopia and selected Latin American countries. That's what's going to be presented here. My name is Alemu Tesfaye. I'm a Regional Programs Manager at OSRIA, and I'm pleased to moderate this session. So today's webinar aims to share and discuss the findings of a consultancy study that we commissioned under the project Empowering Ethiopian Coffee, a South-South approach to climate finance and carbon credits, which is being implemented in the Kafa zone and in Bitta Warada, in two Kabbales, Shadda and Gawite Kabbales, with 118 women coffee producers currently, but it will scale up to include more farmers in the zone. The study explores climate finance mechanisms and carbon credit initiatives in the coffee sector, with a particular focus on lessons that Ethiopia can draw from experiences in Latin America. As many of you know, coffee is central to Ethiopia's economy and livelihoods. Millions of smallholder farmers depend on it. Yet the sector faces increasing challenges due to climate change, land degradation, and limited access to climate finance. At the same time, global interest in carbon markets and climate-smart agriculture is opening new opportunities to support sustainable coffee production while generating additional income for farmers. Understanding how these mechanisms work in practice is therefore essential for all of us. For this reason, OSRIA commissioned a comparative study on climate finance and carbon credit pathways in the coffee sector, focusing on Ethiopia and selected countries in Latin America that already have emerging experiences in this area. The consultancy was conducted by two distinguished experts. One, Professor Design Barecha, is the director of the Coffee Research Center at Jimma University, who brings extensive expertise in coffee research and agroforestry systems in Ethiopia. And second one is Lucia Balestros. She's a climate and gender expert specialized in Latin American contexts, who has worked extensively on climate finance, sustainable agriculture, and inclusive development in Latin America as well. Together, they examined institutional frameworks, carbon market mechanisms, governance systems, gender dimensions, and implementation models across the selected countries. Their analysis provides valuable insights into how carbon credit initiatives can be designed to benefit smallholder coffee farmers while supporting climate mitigation and adaptation goals. The findings of this study are particularly relevant as Ethiopia explores new pathways to mobilize climate finance for the coffee sector, strengthen agroforestry systems, and ensure that initiatives are inclusive, especially for women farmers who play a crucial role in the coffee production. As you know, around from 60 to 75% of the labor-intensive work in the coffee sector is being done by women farmers. So today's webinar provides an opportunity for us to learn from these comparative experiences, reflect on the policy and practical implications, and discuss how such models might be adapted to the Ethiopian context. We are very pleased to have both consultants with us today to present their findings and engage with participants in discussion. I'd like to thank all participants, partners, and stakeholders who have joined us today. And I hope this lesson, specifically Spanish Cooperation, for supporting us in this endeavor. And I hope this session will contribute to strengthening collaboration and knowledge exchange between Ethiopia and Latin America. Please feel free to ask questions or provide any feedback or comment. Use the question and answer area, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, or you can raise your hands and we'll let you speak if you have any questions or comments. With that, let us begin the program. The first speaker is Lucia. She's a climate expert based in Spain with a lot of experience in the Latin American countries. Over to you, Lucia. Miki, can you put her slides?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My presentation today is going to bring you the experience or to exchange these inputs from 4 selected initiatives in Latin America that we have analyzed on the context of climate finance in coffee sector. And what we try to identify lessons that are transferable for Ethiopia. Next slide, please. So, yes, we are going through a little bit of context and overview of this experience that you can find more developed in the annexes of the comparative study. And I think the most important will be these takeaway lessons. And we go on. Please, next slide. But yes, I'm gonna also stop in, as Alemu mentioned, about the gender equality and social inclusion of these initiatives, and also the importance of MRB mechanisms for carbon credits. So, as most of us already know that the coffee systems are highly sensitive to climate. So in the last years and in the coming, we know that these systems are very vulnerable, highly vulnerable to climate risk. So with carbon credits and carbon finance also offers an opportunity on mitigation potential in agroforestry system. So this also increase like carbon storage and also increase, and this is very important, the socio-ecological resilience of the whole ecosystem and the whole system, like all the value chains. So as you may know, since the Paris Agreement, there are a growing interest in carbon markets and climate finance, and therefore, like the carbon finance can support mitigation and farmers' income. That is very important. That these new mechanisms like have this double impact, on the ecosystem, but also in the farmers' community. But to do so, and that this to happen, what we find is that the importance of institutional arrangement and a coherent and easily going MRB, like monitoring, reporting, and verification systems. So next slide, please. Yes. To do so, we selected 4 different experience. The Nicaraguan, Colombia experience are more based on Solidaridad and Plan Vivo initiatives that can be very replicable in the system and are roots in cooperative base and social impacts in the ground. And the other 2, Honduras and El Salvador, these are slightly different, similar always, but also highlight an importance of corporate lead climate finance. So despite the difference are basically the different institutional concepts that we find and the governance structures that are set in place. This initiative also, as I mentioned, share like common elements, and all 4 like share valuable lessons for Ethiopia that is seeking to integrate the smallholders in a carbon finance framework. Next, please. So just to have the flow, this is a systematized structure of how a carbon project flow. So this is grounded in farmers, mainly small holders that adopt agroforestry practices, and they change the baseline of the carbon or the mitigation. This is basically like a plant site, or even like a more, now they are called like food forests, like with planting with fruit trees, and so that is improve the whole ecosystem, and also improve the soil and the the soil. But what it's the farmers are also support and are aggregating in cooperatives. That this is very important. The organization of farmers in cooperatives that provide like more opportunities, and also for training, for aggregate data, and to even yes, aggregate the impact of this kind of projects. So basically also are helped, this project are helped by the project developer that for sure supporting a project management and linking with the different stakeholders and all the content. So and especially the project developer has a important role in monitoring, reporting, and verification of the carbon sequestration. So we go on to the carbon registry, that this is very crucial on the way that if we cannot measure the impact, we cannot have a revenue of that. So carbon registry and the carbon verification is important to become or to integrate in this carbon market, that where the credits are sold and buy and the revenue is generated. So at the end, this ends up in benefits applied to farmers, applied to the community, and we will see now with the cases. Next slide, please. Yes, this is more. This is the same. Is the process of farmers aggregation to cooperative, the support of project coordination of project developers, and the verification and certification of the standards. We go on, please. Next slide. So now we go to the first selected study that was in Nicaragua. This experience, or this initiative, it's started in 2017, and it was a Plan Vivo and Solidaridad initiative. And we choose that because it demonstrates how voluntary carbon markets can support the transition of a small coffee system toward more climate resilient agroforestry landscape. This was implemented in a productive area of Matagalpa and Jinotega, that is in the north of Nicaragua. Nicaragua is a small country of Central America, but already engaged over 1,700 smallholders farmers, and the area of implementation was 2,500 hectares. The context here was like a full sun cultivation, coffee cultivation, like full sun. So this was the added value for intervention to transform these full sun crops to agroforestry systems. So with the support of Solidaridad. The farmers implements like a transformation of the ecosystem with planting fruit trees, native trees, and also like the composting practices. So for the soil restoration. And by doing so, they have carbon sequestration rate approximately between 5 to 7 tons of CO2 equivalent per hectare annually. So, but also, and this is also like important to say, when we apply agroforestry practices in coffee, also coffee productivity rise and the whole ecosystem resilience. They applied in this case, they applied hybrid MRB systems that combines like participatory monitoring and digital verification through more advanced platform. But the important is that the smallholders and farmers were directly applying this monitoring. So at the end of this, no, we just to highlight that like to apply also to Plan Vivo, there are like some social standards to be applied. So in these initiatives, both Solidaridad make a huge effort to increase women participation and also women leadership roles in the initiative. So they started with 15% of women participation, and they expected to have a 30% of involving of women. And also in practices like in the nursery and some kind of spaces, but the most important is that include also women in the cooperative governance structures. The revenues of the carbon credits, but also is there like they apply directly to farmers, 80% to farmers, but the rest is also using the MRB systems and also applied for the project developer operation. So this is Plan Vivo. Now we are going to visit Colombia. Next slide, please. So this experience of Colombia is also like Plan Vivo and Plan Vivo Solidaridad and Plan Vivo standard, but I'm sorry. Yes, Plan Vivo and Solidaridad and with the objective to regenerative coffee landscape. But what is most important that Colombia is like, as you may know, one of the also coffee is on the heart of Colombia economy, Colombia identity, and what they do what they do is to improve the to improve the area. This initiative was located in the Eje Cafetero, but it's also like area that the most productive area in Colombia of coffee production. And the importance of this area is that it's coffee as well as in Ethiopia. It's at the heart of the community. From not only for the production, but also like the social aspect that involved. And this area is one of the UNESCO landscapes declaration, or so I guess like the Kaffa forest in Ethiopia. To focus on the experience, we find the baseline on this area, it's the coffee production was degraded for the I may say exploitation of the effort that the soil and of the crop production. So what they try is like the approaches was to improve with agroforestry practices the resilience of this ecosystem through agroforestry diversification that applies to around 4,000 smallholders, farmers, and the area was estimated in 2,500 hectares that apply these new coffee agroforestry systems. The estimated carbon sequestration rates were approximately, and this is vary between 6 to 10 tons of CO2 equivalent per hectare annually. And with this, the results of the impact is that improve of rural livelihoods and the household incomes. But so, what is important to highlight here is that Colombia is one of the countries pioneering on national carbon registry, and this at the national level, this and that is called RENARE, and exactly it's the RENARE. Sorry, I'm gonna look in my notes. So I want to say it. Yes, the RENARE is the Colombia's National Registry of Emission Reduction that ensures the official recording, verification, and traceability of mitigation outcome across voluntary and compliance carbon mechanisms. So this institutional arrangement that allow like more efficient carbon trades in the appliance of Article 6 of Paris Agreement. So this is well noticed, and through this carbon registry, all these buying and sold of carbons it's applied. So we go on. Yes, Jonas. Sorry, I think that Jonas has a question.
Sorry, Lucia, it's by accident. Continue, please.
Okay, thank you. No, sorry, I'm gonna take 30 seconds to go on. So we go on now with Honduras. That I think that we have a strong relationship with Honduras and Ethiopia. You already participate in some exchange of experience there. Honduras is a productive coffee producing country, also in Central America. But it's not the coffee. It's not one of the main economics revenues in the country. But even though Honduras has a well or advanced in climate policies and also in climate strategies, both in mitigation and with adaptation objectives. And Honduras is it's because climate change and other like not good practice for the environment, but for the last 5 years, Honduras has been suffering huge forest or fire, yes, fire. I don't know if it's correct, but fire risk. They are having like a huge extension of degraded land because like a recurring fires occurs, mostly human cause, but also because the land is becoming drier and drier. But what we are focused now is in this experience of COMSA. COMSA is a cooperative of Marcala that is in the south of Honduras. So um, so this cooperative already applied organic and biodynamic practices for coffee production. This is also important because the baseline here is not changing from degraded land to agroforestry system. They already applied agroforestry system in coffee plantation, but the theme of this experience is how COMSA and how this system already support the policy and the climate policy in Honduras, no, and how this agroecological approach no, that relies in good practice like composting, microbial biofertilants, and also say trees, and applies with other kind of techniques like solar panels for coffee processing and how improve this kind of mechanism or this kind of technology in the practice of coffee production also generates a additional sequestration rates that the cooperative direct apply for the community, and also experience of like schools for children, and they apply also for improve youth opportunities, and what is also important of this and I want to highlight of this COMSA study, or what's interest for when I was analyzing this, is that women already represent 1/3 of the community cooperative members and they are like women are leading productive initiatives. So as like 3 nurseries and compost production. So we go on now for the last selected case that Cafenor in Salvador, and El Salvador is another country, Central American country, where are almost it's also coffee producer. But in this experience, and what we select this experience is because the Cafenor is a company. So Cafenor as a company has been advancing on apply or demonstrate how to be more to reduce the carbon footprints in the system, and also to apply that most advanced protocols, and also to do a comprehensive greenhouse gas inventory in the company. So having this inventory or greenhouse inventory can identify which are in which areas, or which what is called in this which scope, where the higher emissions, so they can apply reduction techniques on there. So for the and improve this reduction. So mostly the main emissions are in the use of diesel consumption in processing. So with a transformation on this they can reduce ton sequestration tons. So this is also very important because companies at the end of the coffee value chains, companies are have a engagement. So as a company or a cooperative who applies this green gas or these carbon footprints also aligns better with what is the buyer's potential, and this gives like a transparency and traceability on that. So it's also a huge potential for scaling this kind of commitment of carbon footprints, because at the end of the coffee value chains, this is a reduction valid. And just to give you some data, by the inventory estimated a footprint of almost 8 tons of CO2 equivalent. But with the design of a roadmap for reduction emission, they improve also like the fleet efficiency with more like electric vehicles, like waste management and composting. So they reduce the emission over 20%. So Cafe Nori is also in the roadmap to achieve like carbon neutral certification, and this will give more competitiveness in the coffee market itself. So next slide, please. Yes. So now we take a break because yes, we did a short presentation of the study cases, but what we found here is several like common or cross-cutting themes that may apply on this kind of initiative. And the first is like the importance of the importance of cooperatives in smallholders aggregation. I think this is an aim because carbon, and for a competitive project, it's need aggregation, and it's need hectares, and it needs like farmers implies on the good practices. But another and even more important is the strong institutional support, and that that enables scalability. And it's applied that if we have a policy climate frameworks like NDCs, and like we saw in Colombia with the Renare registry and this kind of national institutional structures, how at the end of the day facilitates and more effective or facilitates even this kind of carbon finance initiative. It's also very important to highlight here is that MRB systems sometimes can be very complex, and sometimes can be like very technified, and they require a huge investment of resources, and mostly economically resources invest for MRB system. But what we see with in Solidaridad is how they apply hybrid MRB approaches, where small farmers can involve in recording and reporting about their practices and how this it's updating in a platform. So this kind of hybrid MRB approaches are more than welcome to engage community and also to reduce the cost of really expensive MRB systems. Yes, one very important, and bueno, all is important, but other is and is related with MRB is the call for transparency, but the transparency on measure and monitoring carbon reduction, but transparency also in benefit sharing and how these benefits are there distributing through the farmers, through the cooperatives, and also let be very democratic and transparent systems is always a very it's a good practice that we find in the different cases. So transparency, traceability are core for a carbon finance initiative. And at the end, but also very important is yes, which is the context and the baseline of initial baseline on and how the integration of agroforestry are both benefits on. So I always approach in this social and ecological resilience of the ecosystem because at the end of the day, agroforestry will provide a buffer and a long-term benefits for both the ecosystem and for the communities. So we go on because next I want to make a stop as Alemu say at the beginning how gender equality and social and youth inclusion is important because it's as a more integrated and recognize of all the efforts that are in the coffee value chains, more at the end the benefits that we are sharing is properly shared and so yes, women have an active role in the coffee, but also some of the initiative like in Colombia, they ensure that women are also active in leadership position and also in the decision making scenarios in the cooperative. So this is also good to highlight and also to apply the social standards of Plan Vivo. It's an aspect of reference. So yes, also the importance of training, but all the opportunity that is in rural women's reality, the opportunity to access to finance and how this new access to finance can also improve the household and okay, I think that there is just the last. Sorry if I'm taking into time. I'm gonna go through directly to the key lessons for Ethiopia. I think I missed the presentation there, but
I think Mika
perfect.
is connected. Yeah, okay.
Perfect, but then now I check my time and I think I'm gonna go now for the important that are the key lesson. Next slide, please. Yes, this is a comparative of what we were talking about the governance and institutional similarities. So next slide, please. Yes, and this is more or less yes, perfect. This also explain how like systematize the experience. So we go on to the key lessons. Next slide, please. Yes. I'm sorry if I'm saying like several times this, but I want to be very clear on this. The cooperative aggregate smallholders, that the simplified MRB system, the importance of policy alignment, and the gender inclusive in climate finance. So how this is applied? Now, if we have to, next slide, please. Yes, and how we apply this in or for Ethiopia, or this is somehow of ideas, but what we see is, and I'm going to repeat again, the cooperative-based models are more than welcome, that the monitoring and verification system must remain simple and scalable to avoid, to create barriers for smallholders' participation. So as much simplified approaches in MRB, it will help to expand the carbon projects more rapidly. And feel that the importance to be aligned with national climate strategies and policy frameworks. This is for like institutional legitimacy, or to legitimize this kind of projects and how these projects contribute to the commitments of the to national commitment of carbon reduction, also like transformation. So this coordination between ministry, coffee institution, environmental agencies, NGOs, cooperatives is always very required and very positive. And yes, and we go on to the next and my final reflection. So yes, to thanks Austria and Spanish cooperation to for the opportunity of this South-South knowledge exchange in coffee, because many regions around the world are challenging the same risk, and also facing the dilemmas or the dilemmas of transformation. But this source of exchange like really close the experience for smallholders in this case of Latin America, with the opportunities in smallholders in Ethiopia or Africa, that provides yes, as a coffee climate expert and coffee lover, I always see coffee as a solution, because coffee is a food system that really engage producing and consuming countries. So a vision of the coffee value chain as a system, and this is a leverage on this importance of coffee in the context of climate change mitigation and adaptation. So this is also engaged with partnership across institutions, as I mentioned, with national and policy frameworks, but partnership across countries, across regions, across producing and consuming countries, partnerships. It's always how we give more value to coffee, we give value to the practices applied, and also in case of carbon reduction, we see this as opportunity of of a complementary income. And yes, and just to say the less farmers aggregation, because we find in Latin America experience that cooperatives plays a key role, because aggregating hundreds and thousands of smallholders into a single project, to a single vision, it's always a more impactful experience. So I think the last one, please. I see, yes, and thank you. I'm Sakenalu, and many thanks. I think I'm good with my time. Sorry if I take a little bit longer than expected, but that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucia. I hope you can hear me, because I'm currently disconnected from my internet and I'm using my phone. So thank you so much, Lucia, for that insightful presentation and for sharing the valuable experiences from Latin America. The lessons you highlighted provide important inspiration for strengthening carbon credit initiatives in the coffee sector, and also for our pilot project that we are currently implementing in the Kaffa zone. Thank you once again for your contribution. This already included in the comparative report, which we'll be sharing later when it is finalized. So for participants, if you have any questions or comments, you will have the opportunity to raise them during the question and answer session, which will take place after Professor's presentation. But in the meantime, you can also put your questions under the Q&A area, which you can find below on your screen. So with that, I would like now to invite Professor Design to take the floor and present the key findings of the comparative study on carbon credit initiatives in Ethiopia and selected Latin American countries. Professor, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alamo, and good morning, everyone. I'm very much delighted to present what we did with the opportunity given to us by our Commissioner Osiria, generously actually funded by the Spanish Corporation. Can you, Alamo, make me a co-host so that I can share my...
It's okay if Mika share it for you, or you want to share it yourself?
Okay. All right. So thank you so much. As I already indicated in my introduction, we would like to thank the Commissioner, the Osiria, and the Spanish Corporation for giving us the opportunity to actually learn and also to share what we did through this comparative study, which I will focus on more on a comparative way. But my partner, Lucia, she already went through very nicely in terms of what's going on in Latin America, and then actually also the lesson that can be picked to Ethiopia. Next slide. So in a couple of time, I will focus on a few remarks in terms of the making some context on the introduction. And then I'll briefly share with you the methodology that we followed. And then I will try to present the major findings of our comparative study based on the framework and thematic areas like in terms of governance and institutional architecture, MR reviews, carbon finance and revenue flows, benefit sharing, policy alignments, and Articles 6 readiness, and also in terms of sustainability. So next slide. Yeah, as it already indicated, coffee, like any other agricultural crop, climate is actually affecting coffee in many ways. By doing so, the livelihood of many smallholder farmers are being vulnerable to climate shocks. So to make that climate shock to be mitigated, there are several ways of adaptation and mitigation efforts are being taken place across the globe. Very recently, also carbon credit initiatives are actually emerging as an important mechanism to support climate mitigation with additional added values, particularly in terms of enhancing sustainable agriculture and also contributing to livelihoods. And this is actually very important, like in developing country where and farmers are heavily dependent on coffee. So if the carbon credit initiatives are seen as an opportunity, if we can maximize and make them accessible to the carbon market. So the purpose of this study is to actually compare the carbon credit initiative in Ethiopia and some select Latin America, which Lucia already indicated, in order to identify lessons that can be utilized by the Ethiopian coffee sector to scale the initiative that we are having and also other initiatives in the pipeline so that the national coffee sector can benefit a lot from this additional opportunity. So to do our do our comparative businesses, we focus our analysis on certain thematic dimensions like the governance system, the MRV system and approach being used by the initiatives, and the financial models and the benefit sharing mechanism, as well as the policy integration across these two regions. What we can forward as a key message is that, particularly with regard to carbon markets, if the carbon markets are people-centered and if they are well-governed carbon projects, and if they are actually supported by the policy framework, like what Lucia already suggested at the end, and if it is actually equitable benefit sharing, this can actually simultaneously deliver both climate action in terms of mitigation, and it can also contribute to sustainable rural development. So being engaged in carbon financing efforts is actually giving both climate mitigation as well as added value to the community and the country at large. Next slide. In the next slide, I will take you through the methodology that we adopted in terms of study design. As you all know, carbon markets has several dimensions. So based on one analysis or methodology, we cannot address this multidimensional aspect of the market. So we adopted the mixed method of analysis, where we tried to examining the carbon initiative in Ethiopia and select Latin America. Majorly, we used three studies, methods. One was the qualitative comparative case studies. The case study that we were selected were subjected to qualitative comparative analysis. And then we used also very structured document review processes. And we also did some secondary data analysis, particularly from the documented reports by different initiatives. However, before our study, we also thought that for a given country and for a given project to be selected for this case study, we set certain selection criteria for that. We prioritize four important selection criteria. One selection criteria was the relevance of the carbon mechanisms. And the second was community-based implementation, because particularly, we are very much interested the lesson to be scaled to Ethiopian situation, where smallholder farmers are at the center of our interest. And we also looked at the diversity across typologies of the different initiatives. And like what I said, particularly the presence of high data availability on those data, because we did also some secondary data analysis in our the report. In order to present our finding again, we also followed certain analytical framework. We adopted 8 analytical framework under and project typology, where we try to look at the carbon models and the standards being used, the governance, particularly the institutional arrangement, the revenue flows and the mechanisms in place, the social safeguards, the social equity lens that Lucia was mentioning about the gender and inclusions. The most important one is the MRV system that being utilized, and the policy alignment, which is very important, particularly in terms of the initiative aligned with the national determined commitment and also the national strategies. And we also looked at the Article 6 readiness of that initiative, particularly that's very, very important also in carbon market. And of course, sustainability is very important. So we looked at what are the long-term viability and scalability of the initiatives. Next slide. So in the next slide, I will briefly introduce the selected case studies from Ethiopia based on the criteria that we set. We selected 3 important case studies. One is the Humbo assisted natural regeneration, which is actually one of the most pioneer, not only in Ethiopia, but also in Africa, where the community tried to restore over 2,728 hectares of land, and where they managed to actually issue the credit around 73,000. And the participant of this initiative is the 7 cooperative being supported by the local. So, as I said, the Humbo is one of the Africa's first forestry clean development mechanism projects, which is community-led and natural forest regeneration on a degraded land with a key support with World Vision Ethiopia. And the second case study we selected is the Valley Red Plus Eco-Region project, which is the verified carbon standard, and also it is also on the climate and community biodiversity certified. So in this one, this is also one of the largest initiatives in the country, where area protected by this initiative is around 25,000, where they managed to reduce deforestation by 58%. So this is one of the large-scale avoided deforestation in the montane forests, again implemented by the Farm Africa and SOS Sahel with the Oromian government. And the third important case study we selected is the EthioTrees, which is a Plan Vivo project in Tigray region, where they employ the exclosure approach to conserve in the area. So the area covered is around 541 hectares. They also manage this exclosure in 3 locations within that landscape. So one of the most important aspects of this project is it's a community-driven afforestation and also agroforestry model, where they try to restore degraded communal lands in the Tigray through exclosure, as I said. So one of the key achievements that we found from Ethiopian initiative, the 3 initiative in the Ethiopian project, actually demonstrated significant environmental outcomes, as you already seen, reducing 58%. Deforestation is quite significant, whereas they are also important in terms of improving water access and income diversification, and also the local governance that they put in place, particularly in EthioTrees. They managed to access the community with water and also income diversification through apiculture and other fruit trees planting, so that the communities are benefiting not only from the restoration but also from an economic perspective. And particularly the Bale project is also something that's very important in that aspect too, which has a global level certified for the exceptional community benefit. They also actually registered. Next slide. And the next slide I will also briefly introduce, which already Lucia did, but these are the four case study we selected. The community in the Nicaragua, which is one of the world's largest Plan Vivo projects that involves, as you can see, over 4,600 families, and involving over 11,000 hectares of land, where they actually managed to issue around 4.6 million credits. And the most important is that this project managed to pay 60% plus of the carbon revenue directly go to farmers, which is a very unique in actually accessing smallholder farmers. And the smallholder farmers reforestation with native trees and agroforestry system is also one of the most important, particularly that can be also picked by Ethiopia, because the shade-grown coffee that we have a lot of native trees, and they are largely on agroforestry systems. And the other important is the Colombian case, which is focusing on domestic carbon offsets, where the Colombian government put a carbon tax prices which range between $5 and $15 per ton of carbon dioxide. And by these efforts, the country managed to offset over 25 million ton of carbon dioxide. It's not only that, but because of that innovative approach, the national carbon tax has managed to mobilize over hundreds of millions into the domestic mitigation effort. And the Honduras case, which is nicely presented by Lucia, is one of a good example where Article 6 readiness is in the process of making, where this group are actually reaching on bilateral agreement with the Korean government to purchase based on the possibility that, or the provision that the Article 6 and also the Paris Agreement is actually giving. And the last is El Salvador, which is also a different modality, where the trust fund is actually playing, rather than directly paying for farmers. The coffee forest rates plus are actually reducing the farmers' debt, which account for over 30% of the carbon payment mechanism. So as you can see, in terms of payments, in terms of carbon mechanism, they are different, which can be also be a good lesson for us. My general reflection on the Latin America, as you can see, the Latin American cases are they are at a large scale. And in terms of market integration, they are also well market integrated, and policy, particularly the Colombian carbon tax, demonstrate how policy can unlock significant private finance for climate action. is actually something that we can learn for Ethiopia. Next. This is just a comparative, which I will not much waste on that, but I would just highlight this is just a presentation of comparative between Latin American and some Ethiopian projects. But I would like to emphasize on the strengths of these projects. The Ethiopian and projects have significant strengths, particularly being a pioneering model under constrained market, because the market infrastructure, the logistic, and also the guidelines are not there. But under those constraints and limitations, still they did a great job, and they managed to actually get credit for their community. The second very important strengths of Ethiopian projects are they are very strong in terms of gender, and they are also very strong in terms of social safeguards, because the communities have their own bylaws and also agreements in administering, in managing, in MRV system. So that will make the Ethiopian project a bit more stronger in terms of gender. And another strength is they are more community centered, and the benefits is also going for the communities. When I come to Latin Americans project strengths, the Latin American projects are very greater in terms of their scale, and they are also very strong in terms of market maturity, because they already entered the global markets in a different approach. So they are more stronger in terms of market maturity and market integration. They are also strengths in terms of direct household level payment, which we already seen in Nicaragua, for example, where they managed to pay for individual smallholder farmers. Another very important strength is the policy-driven demand mechanism that the different countries like Colombia has actually created in carbon tax, which increases the demand for carbon offsets in the country. Generally, as a key insight from this overview analysis, both regions, both Ethiopia and also Latin Americans, share baseline and credit accounting with the third-party validation, which Lucia already dealt a lot. And one very important clear observation is there is a convergence toward this nested or programmatic approaching, integrating project with the national framework, which is also something that Lucia has recommended for us to adopt. Next. So in the followings, I will briefly present the finding based on thematic framework that we used. One of the thematic analysis is that the typology, the carbon typologies and the standard being used. As you can see, the Ethiopian project, the Humbo is using the clean development mechanism of the United Nations, whereas the Bali is using the verified carbon standard and also the climate, community, and biodiversity certificates. And the EthioTrees is the Plan Vivo project. And the Latin Americas, the communities that are also Plan Vivos, and the Colombian case is the VCs, and the Honduras is actually on the Red Plus with that of Article 6 focused. So there are common carbon models have been observed, and in both countries, like what Lucia indicated, the baseline and credit is common for both. And all projects employ baseline and credit accounting for emission reduction or removals, and striving for additional and employing third-party validation and certification. And of course, they are also converging toward this program approach. Next slide. With regard to governance structure, because governance is very, very important in carbon markets, and because it also determines who is actually governing the land, the carbons, or who is actually determining the benefits. So that's also very, very important to reflect on that. So in our thematic analysis, we found that in terms of governance structure, Ethiopian projects are more of an hybrid governance, whereas in Latin America, they are non-state actor focused the governance mechanism being in place. Particularly in terms of their key features, the Ethiopian project, they usually employ joint forest management agreements, transferring stewardship toward this community cooperative, which is actually one of the ground breaking shifts from the centralized control that we have in many sectors in this country. But as a key feature in Latin America is actually the built on the pre-existing community forest institutions, leverage from decades of community forest and payment for ecosystem services scheme that has been taking place in there. So our comparative insights show that the Ethiopian case highlight intensive capacity building and creation of new local institutions, like formation of cooperative associations and the like, or farmers groups. But in Latin American cases, they leverage from the pre-existing. That's actually something that we can also learn there. But both emphasized on gender representation, and Ethiopia's women-only saving cooperatives in Latin America's growing women leadership programs are a good example where these projects are actually giving due attention for gender. Next slide. I will also briefly show comparative on the MRV approach between the two case studies. Generally, the MR reviews are involving in the three areas, like some of the MR reviews are employing remote sensing, where satellite imageries for forest cover monitoring and baseline establishment are being utilized. And recently also some of the projects, particularly in Latin America, they are also using digital innovations, particularly mobile-based application and machine learning for real-time data collections are something that is actually going on and that can be adapted. But of course, still a community role is also very important, particularly communities are very relevant in terms of local participation in ground truthing and continuous monitoring of the project. Next slides. With regard to finance models and revenue distributions, as you can see, particularly in Ethiopian cases, we usually follow the upfront financing mechanisms, and particularly Ethiopians are more based on donor and public, so usually World Bank biocarbon funds and the Norwegian bilateral grant are some of the financing mechanism, which is result-based aid model has been implemented in Ethiopia. But in Latin America, it's more on market-driven, which is something that we can also learn because they are following the forward contract with corporate buyers, which is sustainable in terms of business models. So these are something that we can also think for Ethiopia. In terms of revenue distributions, as we already indicated earlier, in case of Nicaragua, for example, 60% goes directly to the farmers. But here in Humbo, for example, which is communal, which goes to the cooperatives, where the cooperative members are trying to develop community-interested projects rather than directly going to individual and pockets. So as a key insight, so Latin Americans are directly paying models. This has actually created a strong household incentive for individual farmers, but in Ethiopia's communal approach, which build collective assets, are more commonly applied both in Humbo and also in Bales as well. But in our analysis and in our literature review as well, we emphasize that both the direct payment and also communal approach are more relevant if we use them as a combination of recommended financing and revenue distribution mechanism. Next slide. So in terms of benefit sharing, I already highlighted already. So the Himbo in Ethiopian case, for example, is a democratic fund allocation, where, for example, the community representative agreed to establish a grain milling, which can also address women labor burden, while also addressing community benefits. In Bali also, they try to use revolving funds and savings so that women can also get some access for loan so that they can also invest on other livelihoods diversification opportunities. In EthioTrees, they really prioritize landless individual within the community, where they try to address those landless through beekeeping, and they also try to construct water access for the community. In Latin Americans, as we already indicated, some of them they directly paid for farmers, and they also address some seasonal job for landlesses. And some also produce, like El Salvador, for example, they work on debt relief. And in Honduras, they also focus on community funding, which is also a revolving fund. So just to highlight the gender focused in both regions, the gender focus shows intentional integration, which is actually seen as strengthened, particularly for quotas, leadership roles, and targeted benefits in initials are important in terms of focusing on gender. And focusing on marginalized group, which nonetheless uses, focusing on indigenous communities, women-headed household prioritizations in benefit distributions are also something that we see as a positive in terms of benefit sharing mechanism. Next slide. In terms of policy alignments, the Ethiopian and projects have actually some contribution to the policy that we have. Ethiopia has actually climate resilient green economy strategies. So the projects are actually framed within this, and also within the national NDC's alignments. And in terms of Latin America, also they are well aligned, particularly the carbon taxes in Colombia, and also the national strategy by Honduras, where they try to link the carbon market initiative. In that is something that we see as a potential policy framework and integration. Just to sum up, both regions converging on bottom-up informed top-down models, particularly community initiative inform national policy, while frameworks enable scale. Particularly in Ethiopia's projects are actually influenced by the climate resilient green economy, the RED plus readiness, and carbon market strategy, which is released very recently. Those are something that actually influences the carbon markets. And in Latin America, the policy integration is more advanced, with Colombia's tax mechanism demonstrating policy-driven demands as something that we can also pick as a base lessons. Next slide. In terms of readiness to Article 6 readiness, Ethiopian readiness is already indicated in the national strategy, which is covering from 2025 to 2035. But the legal gap analysis are not in legal framework, particularly the carbon laws are in the process of making. And the Ethiopian government has already finished the legal gap analysis, but the carbon law is still something that we are waiting for. In terms of institutional capacity, there are several organizations doing capacity training and the standard crediting framework pilots in the countries like the UNDP, the GGG, and World Banks are doing a lot in Ethiopia. In terms of systems development, the National Carbon Registry is planned, and the MRV alignment with the enhanced transparency framework is in a process of making. But I think these are an area where we need to invest a lot. So with regard to the status, I already, as I indicated, it's close to Article 6 readiness on paper, but finalizing the laws and testing the procedures are still remaining. With regard to Latin American cases, as you can see in Honduras, thank you. So as you can see in Latin American cases, the status is more promising. For example, in Honduras, they already showed on COP29 the ITMO sales announcements, which they already made with the Korean government as a bilateral agreements. In Colombia as well. So the status in Latin America is more promising because they already started implementation and actual transaction is already beginning. So when we look at in terms of designated authority, in the national authority to approve Article 6 transactions and BED projects are quite important. And the registry systems, the National Carbon Registry for tracking and avoiding double counting is something that we need to stress, particularly for a country like Ethiopia. And in terms of environmental and development co-benefit, because we also looked at how the initiatives are contributing to biodiversity, water access, and livelihood, and the co-benefit across the regions, particularly in terms of ecosystem benefit. If you see the Humbo project in Ethiopia, the promotion of native forest restoration has contributed to biodiversity return and erosion reduction. In Bali as well, over 25,000 hectares of forestry conserved, which also contributed for endemic species protection and water catchment improvement. In the community in Nicaragua, soil replacement and 20 plus native species have been conserved, and water retention in the system in the landscape has been also improved. In terms of livelihood benefit, also income diversification from beekeeping, wild coffee collections, and ecotourism in the fruit orchards in Ethiopia are some of the notable livelihood benefits from those projects. Education access, particularly when the livelihood of the families are improved, families are actually sending their children to school due to better income. So that's also another added benefits from those initiatives. And the direct payments, the cash payments and seasonal employment and technical training that is given by the project developers as well as also the community is something that we can also count on, and direct payment that the community is receiving in the efforts. In terms of women-specific activity, time saving has been shown as one of the core benefits in this project, particularly in Humbo, for example, creating access to the grain mills and also access to water, which can also cut long hours of labor for water fetching, is something that can be recognized in the project. In terms of income generation, they are also promoting poultry, beekeeping, handcrafts, and independent enterprises through loans are also something that these projects are contributing to the livelihood in terms of core benefiting. So the projects are also contributing to sustainable development goals, particularly they are contributing to SDG 1, the no poverty, SDG 5 for gender equality, clean water, and climate actions. So generally, in terms of climate resilience, the projects act as a buffer during the climate shocks, and Ethiopian communities fared better during, for example, in 2015-16 El Nino droughts. And similarly, the Latin American farmers protected during hurricanes through mixed forestry. So we can count on the added value in addition to the landscape improvement and also carbon sequestration. There are other added values in terms of ensuring climate resilience. In terms of long-term sustainability, we try to look at the financial sustainability, institutional sustainability, and environmental sustainability. In terms of financial sustainability, particularly in Ethiopia, the revolving community funds and the ongoing market demand and donor dependency are a bit risky. But in Latin America, the forward contracts and diversified buyers and the readiness for Article 6, which allow them to get premium price potential, is actually seen as a positive in terms of sustainability. So the key message there is diversification beyond carbon revenue is quite essential in order to sustain the initiative in terms of financial sustainability. In terms of institutional sustainability, particularly in Ethiopia, cooperative remain active and government recognition, youth engagements, and somehow challenging. In Latin America, the pre-existing robust institutions, indigenous authorities, and local management trainings are more key in terms of institutional sustainability. So as a key sustainability message, that leadership turnover and the continuous capacity buildings is something that we need as an attention. Environmental sustainability, the permanent risk is like the wildfires, the climate impacts, and the political change and the external threats are seen as a permanent risk, particularly in terms of Ethiopia, for example. For Latin America, the buffer system is more seen as a positive because the credit reserves for reversals and the community vigilance when benefit angels are also seen as one important element. So the key is that the ecosystem resilience through species diversity in the system is very, very important to ensure sustainability. To wrap up, replicability and scaling are something that we want to realize. and particularly context-specific adaptations are very much needed, but the core principle of highly replicable should also be maintained. Ethiopia's Ethio-tree model can be scalable to millions of hectares, while also the communal tree spreading to Guatemala, Uganda, and also other countries. So the South-South knowledge exchange can accelerate those kind of replications through farmers to farmers learning and cooperative exchange, which has already been started in Latin America. In terms of strategic insight from what we have analyzed, I will just present some of the lessons which can be transferred to Ethiopia and also to the Latin America, and also in terms of scalability. As a cross-cutting strategic insights, in terms of project typology, Ethiopian forest-based, either forestation of forestry bed or REDD+, and that of Latin Americans, which include agroforestry, something that we can see as an opportunity. So direct farmer revenue models, which also reached around 80% versus communal infrastructures, are something that we see as important. In terms of governance, Ethiopian NGO driven, but for Latin American users, cooperatives are more influential. So the multi-stakeholder arrangement can strengthen the sustainability of the project. And in terms of MRV, the Latin America leads in technology utilization, particularly in satellite and mobile apps. But Ethiopians have been also using ground-based monitoring, which can adopt digital tools that is already under making or being utilized in Latin America. In terms of carbon finance, Latin America's large market access can be seen as an opportunity for Ethiopia to learn from that. So Ethiopia's community-centric approach is still relevant, but in terms of diversifying the market access, I think Ethiopia should learn. So the Colombia's, particularly carbon tax, can provide policy lessons for Ethiopia. In terms of benefit sharing, Latin America's direct payment can create a strong incentive for farmers, but the Ethiopian's communal approach can build collective assets for the community or for the association or for the group. So we are in favor of a combination of recommendation where we can also adopt both the communal approach where the community can build collective assets and also direct payment. In terms of policy insights, Colombia's domestic offset demonstrates policy-driven demand, which is creating a lot of demand for domestic markets. And also the Hondurans moratorium shows regulatory cautions. So I think we need to give due attention for policies and the role policies can play in the carbon markets. In terms of Article 6 readiness, Latin America's implementations leads a very good roadmap for Ethiopia, for example, to adopt. So Ethiopia's preparation should position well for future engagement with similar experience from Latin America. In terms of sustainability, both regions shows institutional sustainability through cooperative models, particularly diversified funding, are quite critical for long-term viability, both looking for an alternative markets across the globes. As an overarching lessons, a project that intentionally empower women, marginalized groups, ensure robust MRV, and share benefit equally and align with national policy, achieve stronger outcomes and sustainability across both regions. So in the projects initiative that we are having in the pipelines, I think we need to target those important elements like empowering women, inclusion of the marginalized groups, a robust MRIV, and also equitable benefit sharing and aligning to the nationals are very, very important element to be considered. The policy implications are similar to what Lucia already indicated. One of the most important policy implications for Ethiopia is integration of the climate into the national strategies and NDCs, particularly this climate finance is mentioned there, but customizing or operationalizing into different sectors, including the coffee sector, is something that we need to recommend. So particularly fast-tracking approval processes need to be put in place for sector like coffee, where the carbon, agroforestry-based carbon is actually emerging. Article 6 readiness, particularly establishing the DNA, the national registry authorization criteria, are very important element that Ethiopia should consider, particularly ensuring community benefits through appropriate guarantees are very important, because in terms of financing, still communities have to wait for long years before the credit is actually paid back. So those are also very important to look at it. Cross-sectoral collaboration is very, very important for climate, coffee, and carbon nexus. So creating coffee, climate, finance working group within Agriculture, Environment, and Finance Ministry of Ethiopia is something that we want to imply as a policy implications. For financial incentives, risk guarantees, preferential loans, mobile banking for carbon payments, and price premiums are something that need to be explored for Ethiopian cases. We know that the Ethiopian government is investing on land right issuance certificates. So particularly when we see carbon marketings are very, very liable for land and carbon tenure systems. So formalizing farmers' right to carbon benefits is something that the Ethiopian government should also give a priority. So clarifying carbon right in a cooperative bylaws and other directives and guidelines is quite important. In terms of capacity building, integrating carbon financing literacy into extension system is something that we want to promote. And focusing the training of women farmers in terms of the leadership and benefit sharing and also participation is something that we need the Ethiopian government to pick. The social inclusions, codifying gender requirements, at least to 30 to 50% women beneficiaries should be clearly indicated in the project document. And there has to be also grievance addressing mechanisms, and also reportings are very important. We also see some policy recommendation on implication from programmatic scaling. So launching national coffee and climate program with the targets to 2030 is something that we need the Ethiopian government to pick and do immediately. Moving beyond piecemeal project, rather the Ethiopian government should launch a big national level program so that it can help the large smallholder farmer that the country is actually having. In terms of implementation goal, we suggest that it's very important to create an ecosystem that encourages and facilitates successful projects. Supportive policy enables implementers, attract funders, confidence and also create a self-reinforcing cycle where success stories build momentum for scaling. So I think we need to also pick those success factors. As a final recommendation, we want to forward our recommendation for different groups. For the policymakers, we want recommend that establishing coffee climate task force is something that we recommend. Drafting national carbon project guidelines is also something that we want to push. Implement a financial incentive, particularly for payment for ecosystem service, tax breaks, and others is something that need to be considered by the policymaker. Strengthening land and carbon tenure certificate issuance is also something that we push. And set up government monitoring and evaluation systems is very important to be considered by the policymakers. The implementers should also adopt participatory co-designing. They should also ensure quick, tangible benefits to the community. And they also should consider professionalize the MRV with practitioners. And like what Lucia was mentioning, as much as possible, the MRV system should be easily adaptable, easily utilizable rather than complicated one. Focusing on gender inclusion, particularly in the form of quota and training, is something that we recommend for implementers. Develop scaling business plans within the project is very important. For funders, provide blended finance, both in the form of grants and loans, is very important rather than providing one type. Blended financial approach is something that we want to recommend. Investing on MRV or data infrastructure is also very important, and support policy engagement, demand co-benefit and inclusions, and commit to long-term phased funding. Some of the recommendations we put forward for funders. Just to reinforce the cycle recommendation, particularly reinforce each other's, because we cannot separate one from the other. So supportive policy enabling, which attract funders' confidence, whose investment flourish under good policies and competent implementation, is something that we need. So as an Indigo, we are aspiring to have a climate smart, carbon financed coffee farming becomes a mainstream practice both in Ethiopia and in Latin America. As a conclusions, our cross-case synthesis highlight that Ethiopia and Latin American demonstrate that community-based, nature-focused climate projects deliver profound climate and development benefits, particularly from the common threat perspective. Integrating environmental restoration with local livelihood improvements are very, very important. As a success factor, empowering community, ensuring robust monitoring mechanism, share benefit equitably, and aligning with the policy and continuous capacity buildings are some of the success factors that we need to count on. For Ethiopia, leverage South-South knowledge exchange, strengthening policy framework, institutionalizing benefit sharing, invest in MRV innovations, and maintaining gender focus, and plan for long-term scales are something that the Ethiopian should consider. As a final message from my team and myself, carbon credit projects, when people-centered, are powerful vehicles for climate objectives and social economic development. So by cross-pollinating ideas and maintaining strong alignment between action and policy, we ensure these initiatives leave lasting legacy for greener landscapes and more prosperous, resilient community in both countries. I thank you. Back to you, Alam.
Thank you so much, Professor Gazain, for that very, very informative and insightful presentation. Your analysis of the comparative study has provided us with a clearer understanding of the current landscape of carbon credit initiatives and the lessons that Ethiopia can take or can learn from the experience of Latin American countries. The way you highlighted both the opportunities and the practices and the practical challenges is extremely valuable for researchers, for policymakers and practitioners working in the coffee sector. I truly appreciate the depth of your analysis and the important contribution this study for sure will make to strengthen climate finance initiatives and sustainable coffee production in Ethiopia and, of course, in Latin America. Thank you so much, Prof, for that. We'll now move to the question and answer session. If there are any comments, feedbacks, or questions, you are welcome. You can use the Q&A area, or you can raise your hand, and Dr. Jonas will facilitate that session for us. Dr. Jonas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alam. Since we only have about, I think, 5 minutes left, we might not have enough time for proper Q&A. So would it be possible to allocate an additional 10 minutes maybe so that participants can ask a few more questions? And our presenter will respond accordingly if there is any. Will it be okay for all of participants and also for you as well?
Yeah, let's see if there is, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Okay.
Are there any questions from anyone? If not,
there is one question, Alex, in the question and answer.
Yeah, our participants, I think, whose name began with initial HP, he commented us, thank you for the nice presentation of this country's experience. Okay, thank you, HP, for your kind words. He also asked us, or he or she also asked us, can you share some MRV mechanisms of simplified MRV system approach of these countries? And already Alamu responded for this question on the post. Maybe if Prof. Gazai or Lucia, if you want to add more, you can use this opportunity. Otherwise, we'll proceed with any other further question. Maybe the third one is the new one. It is, I think, for Prof. the same initial named begin with HP. Prof, thank you very much for the nice presentation. Again, this is a kind of word of appreciation. Thank you very much for your kind words again. So let me take again the floor if any of the participants have additional comments, questions they would like to share with us. Now it is open.
Okay, Yoni.
Yeah.
Okay, so this comparative study of carbon credit initiatives in the two countries, in Ethiopia and selected Latin American countries, the draft report have been submitted to us. Once it is finalized, we'll share the same report on the EthioLatinCoffee website, EthioLatinCoffee.com. That's our website. But we'll also, the consultants will also come up with policy briefs, which will be shared with various actors, as indicated in the last slide of Professor. Is there any question here? Okay, so if there are no questions, I think we can ask Dr. Trofena.
There is one hand
for us.
Yeah. There is a raised hand from the attendees, Alex, whose name is Buzuna.
Okay. You can allow him to talk.
Yeah, I already allowed, but his mic is off.
Buzuna, you can unmute yourself and speak.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Alamu and the team. I try to follow the presentation as much as possible, and I'm very interested in the presentations. I have only one comment for Alamu. Can we have like a short meeting to deal on UDR relating with these presentations? If possible, we can have an appointment and discuss together. Thank you.
Yeah, it's possible. We can arrange that. Professor also can join with us. There is also an upcoming project on EUDR, actually being implemented by GIZ, and we can also talk about that. Yeah,
Thank
we are
you.
available. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. We have only 2 minutes. I want to thank you most sincerely, Lucia and Professor Gazegin, for the insightful presentations that you have given us. You've given us deep research, comparative study across continents, within the countries, across countries, and this transcontinental south to south knowledge learning exchange is very helpful, especially with climate finance, now that it is a new area that the global south is getting into. I am also very grateful to the deep research that you have conducted and the recommendations that you have given. Now the onus is on us to ensure that we follow up and do the implementation of this. We are grateful that Austria is going to have another project related to this on women in coffee again, and this will together continue strengthening the south to south cooperation in terms of coffee. So I just want to thank the 2 presenters, and I want to thank also all those participants who are here. You may not have gotten time to speak, but we know that you can go back and write to us, and whatever questions you have or concerns you may be having will be responded to. Thank you very much. With this, we close this webinar. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. If you have any more questions, comments, feedbacks, please send it to me through the email that you received this invitation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Lucia.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, all participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Alam.
Thank you.